Hi, thanks for the introduction. It's actually a good starting point to have Dominic speak before, because we're sort of working, I guess, in the same space. So yeah, I'm co-founder, CEO of a company called Parity. We're located in Berlin and London. Started about 3.5 years ago, and we basically built open source infrastructure for the web, peer-to-peer software, notably blockchain. And I want to tell you a little bit about how this fits into what we came to call the Web3, so a future vision for the web, much more decentralized, much more in users' hands. But then also dig a bit deeper, like I guess many of you are interested in blockchain because this is a blockchain session, so what's the state of the chain? So what's happening, what's going to happen, why hasn't everything gotten revolutionized by blockchain already, what's going to happen? So here we are. So if you've heard of us, you might have, I mean, does anybody know the company Parity? Anybody heard of us? Cool. Who knows Ethereum? Few people. Bitcoin? Guess more people. Okay. So I personally started in the space around 5 years ago, and many people have talked about like, oh, blockchain really needs a problem that it can solve, or like, what does it actually do, and whatnot. Like, I actually came to the space with a concrete problem, with the problem of how can I deal with my personal data that I don't want, like Google, WhatsApp, Instagram, whoever, that I don't want them to own. And I was researching online around 5 years ago and came across discussions how to use blockchain exactly for that, like how to build infrastructure where ownership is pushed to the edges being the users, so they being in control of how they share data. And I joined the Ethereum team back then. I led the security audits prior to launch. And then once we came out of that, we started Parity because we were convinced we need to build much more in this domain to make this vision of Web3 a reality. So a completely peer-to-peer decentralized stack. So we worked on Ethereum initially. We worked on, we have our own Bitcoin implementation. Most recently, we started work on Zcash. That's a private version of Bitcoin, which is quite interesting because it combines blockchain technology with another technology called zero-knowledge proofs, which is basically a way of adding privacy to the blockchain, whatever that means. But it's quite interesting that these technological developments are sort of coming together at the moment. Later on, about 2 years ago, we worked on a project, and we're still working on that actually with the World Food Program, a deployment of an Ethereum protocol version that basically uses blockchain in order to bring more transparency to how aid is distributed to refugees. And the problem there is like refugees are usually, or camps are usually in places where there's little infrastructure, often not well regulated or no regulation at all. So how can you ensure that you like don't lose your funds and whatnot? So that's one bit that we've done more recently, much more lower down the stack as well. But overall, like we really want to build this open source stack and a fundamentally new way of building services, like very different from what we're used to, like everything being run like very obscure on cloud servers. We don't have control over anything at all, but an open stack. So yeah, how did we come to that? Like 1992, everything felt really bare bone, so many opportunities, like the web, an open thing for everybody to connect to, information to share. But really, because of the way of how the tech worked, or the tech still works, the way how we did this was to use intermediaries for everything, basically. Everything, any service that we've been used to, like PayPal replacing a bank, but also like anything new that we did, WhatsApp. And it's become much more powerful because there's digitization behind. And depending on like where you're coming from, whether you run a business and you're like upset because it's really hard to compete with anybody like Facebook or Google or WhatsApp, or whether you're just a citizen concerned about their personal data, like the truth is like the tools we have are broken or not sufficient, and the only way we're basically interacting online is by putting enormous amounts of trust in the entities behind that, in the entities that run it. And for me, really, that's why it was like 2015, and for me this became like, I think like many of you probably had like feelings, oh, what's actually going on in my phone? But for me, I think the total scale and the relevance of the problem became clear with the Snowden revelations, because that just shows like how massively data collection was already back then being done. So yeah, and our belief fundamentally is like unless we have peer-to-peer open source software protocols, we won't solve that problem. There are efforts, and GDPR is one of them that will complement them, and we really need them. But we do feel it's easy to be a tech enthusiast, in particular if you're like a mathematician like I am, but I do fundamentally believe like this technology is different. Because, and I'll jump a little bit further, because it provides a way of hard-coding rules into a stack, into an application that I don't have to trust, but that I can check. And if I can't check it, then there are other people who can check it because it's open source, because everything's transparent and not run in a secluded server somewhere, wherever. So why is that relevant? Because it allows us to deal with trust in a much more granular way. Say, I do trust Google to run really high-end, fast computing, high-performance computing, but I don't trust them at all, and probably many of you don't, to actually be concerned about our personal data, to actually care what's happening to it. And I guess the Cambridge Analytica scandals on the Facebook side have shown that quite dramatically, and also have shown that they actually don't have any clue what's going on behind the scenes. Like, there are contracts in place, but like what's actually happening, there's no way to control these really, really high complex infrastructures behind that. So hopefully a much more granular way to do that. A way of like reducing the divide between users and services providers, because everything in this future land is basically infrastructure and can be built on. So, or another way to look at it, it's really open source commons that we'll be living on, and that notion of this is public infrastructure and not like somebody owns the data and processes behind it. It's also our biggest bet on monopolies, totalitarianism. I mean, many of you might have followed the discussions around Article 13. And if you think a bit more deeply about it, then really, like, why should we rely on any intermediary if we just want to publish something? If I'm an artist or like just a person, like, how come that Medium or Twitter or whoever has so much power or is being leveraged to take down whatever I publish, however I express myself? So, in summary, like, it's really coming from a point from can't do evil, from don't do evil, like mission statements, to can't do evil. And from a tech perspective, and that's what we are doing, like this fundamental new way of architecting applications in this peer-to-peer way. Peer-to-peer sounds kind of, it's kind of a nice term, but doing this is really hard. It's a very different way of connecting computers, a lot of technical problems that need to be solved in order to do that. So what's the state? So lots of problems, although we were really enthusiastic 5 years ago that like, oh yeah, but blockchain is the solution, and we still believe that, but tons of problems, like scalability is a big one, privacy, I mentioned ZK snarks earlier, governance, a really big one in general, but in particular when you're trying to do this now on like these decentralized global platforms, and it needs a lot of work. And so our answer to that is basically a framework that we started to build about 2 years ago called Polkadot and Substrate, which hopefully will make that happen to allow all sorts of groups to innovate jointly, because building this and replacing the giants will be a collaborative effort. So yeah, one way, and I think interesting way of looking at this. I mean, you might have heard about different chains and platforms that I should choose and whatnot. So if on one end you have like the option of, oh, I launch my own chain, or I do a private chain, or like all these things that people have discussed. Or on the other hand, I use a smart contract system and I build on a platform. That's really just two very specific ways of building these decentralized applications. And what we're trying to do with this framework is to open up like the space in between and allow for innovation between these two endpoints, basically. So yeah, Substrate, Polkadot, I don't think I have time to go into that much more deeply. But if you're interested to learn more about that, so we are putting together an event later this year in Berlin, actually, called Web3 Summit, where we're bringing together a lot of the people. I think Dominic will be there as well, by the way, to work on this, because we really believe we have to do that, and we have to do that jointly, because this is a massive problem. We're also hiring if you're interested. So thanks.